Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Behind the Door series. We had 2 weeks off. Hope everyone had a nice holiday. Um, Wanted to kind of jump right in and just talk today. I actually had this topic queued up before, or in light of all the stuff that's kind of happened in our country over the last 24 hours, 18 hours, whatever it's been. I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the idea of community. Heard an interesting podcast over the weekend, just kind of talking about the idea of community when it comes to our social relationships, specifically our social media relationships, and how I guess you can see some of that. That has been occurring. It's been a topic that we've talked about before, just kind of the divide that we can get into based upon the platforms that we're on and how those algorithms kind of feed us and kind of push us apart rather than pulling us together. So, if you think back to community, how it used to be before maybe we had smartphones or even the platforms that we have on our smartphone, there really wasn't a lot of strife historically. There's always been conflict, but most of the time things would be handled within the neighborhood. Maybe there was a city issue, but within that neighborhood, at times you would look out for each other, you would police each other, you would handle these situations as they come. You would agree to disagree, and very rarely would there be just outright violence or chaos. And so social media and the devices that we're on have given us a great opportunity, a great way to connect with other people, to find other people. It's just one of those ideas of, who is in your community. We used to know everyone that was in your community. You used to know your neighbor, everyone on the street. How frequently is that occurring now, especially in our urban areas? And so, the more that we are kind of locked in our houses or locked into our devices, the less we are connecting with other people on our block, our neighbors, and in our community. And that can lead to some of the things that we're seeing, where people are very dismissive of each other, people are very dismissive of just, other humans. And so, one of the things that we talk about in the practice, and usually use this with our tweens and our teens because we see this in a lot more statistically a lot more in them, is just this idea of popularity, which connects to community. And we do this little activity, and we've talked about it before. You do 1 to 10. Where do you put yourself on there? And inevitably, they'll put themselves somewhere, usually not a 10, but somewhere on that continuum. But if you, and then you ask them to put people around them, and they're always going to put people, you don't tell them this, but they're always going to put people that are either in their school or in their neighborhood, but like real people that are in their community. Problem now is if we said, all right, now think about your social media platforms that you're on and popularity and where you are. I mean, they're going to use a metric. They're going to use a number of people that follow me, number of views or hits that I have on a particular platform or a particular uh, feed that you put out a video, whatever the case may be. And so now they're changing the way they think about community and they change the way they think about popularity based upon that. We want them to we want our teens and our tweens and even our adults too to be able to scale that back and say, well, who are the people that matter? Who is really in my community? Is the community the people that are in my community, people that are in my school? Is that the community that I'm on, whether it's a Reddit thread or Discord or Instagram, whatever the case may be, TikTok? How are we defining community? Because how we define it is influencing what we think about it. It's influencing how we are forming our opinions, especially for our young people. So they're getting pulled in many different directions based upon that community. That community could be very negative. It could be very conflict ridden. And so they are getting exposed to that, and that becomes the norm for them. It could be where, you say things and it's very aggressive, verbally aggressive. It could be bullying. It could be, you see a lot of things with people just telling people to kind of leave, leave this earth, unfortunately. And so the community that they're in, that your kids are in, you need to be really aware, just like you would if they're getting on their bike and they're 10 and they're riding around the neighborhood. You know, you may not let them do that depending on the community that you're in. But in a sense, we have to be very careful, just like we would with a kid getting on a bike and riding to the store when they're getting on these devices. We need to make them aware and then safeguard them around some of these things. And I know it's really hard to do. It's really hard to keep up with all that. And, many talks about the number of different platforms that come out every month, anywhere from 31 to 44,000 different apps every month come out, and so you can't stay ahead of that necessarily, but it's just important to keep that in mind about that community that your kids are swimming in. And so if they're on different platforms, they're in different communities. And the more real community, the more real contact, the more interaction with real humans, the better and the stronger that's going to be. I know that's a challenge right now during COVID, but we have to find ways to help us as adults and as our kids connect with their community, connect with positive people, connect with allowing them to make a mistake and say something wrong and not be chastised over it over and over again and retweeted or reposted. Kids are, at least the ones that we're seeing in the practice, they're developing that idea that we've talked about before, is that fragility. So they're less willing to take chances. Um, and so they're developing anxiety around these things. And so when you're in a community where you're allowed to make mistakes, and that's what being a teenager is making mistakes, saying the wrong thing, your voice cracking, you name it. Like, these are things that are supposed to happen. They help us develop resilience. They help us to not have that fear of fragility, to be willing to take chances. So it makes us more resilient against anxiety. And so we need to make sure that our kids are um, in the right communities on these social platforms, as well as doing stuff in real life. And we want to give them good, healthy outlets to create those communities. And we want to be good role models in how we conduct ourselves in these communities. So just keep that in mind, keep that idea in mind of community, because kids are very vulnerable, especially right now, given COVID and less access to those means and less access to real live humans interacting on a daily basis, and giggling and laughing and allowing them to make mistakes because they found a good community. So just bear that in mind on a daily basis of, what is the community that my kids are roaming around in, just like they are roaming around in different neighborhoods. You'd make sure if they went to the neighborhood across the street, you'd want to know if it's a safe neighborhood. You'd want to know who's there. So don't stop losing your parental instincts when it comes to things like that, and understand the communities that they're living in. One potential platform to help you understand some of those communities is an app called Bark, BARK. And so it's something you can go explore. It helps you give access to what your kids are doing on the social media perspective, and it has it hits tags. So if there's like keywords that come up, you'll be made aware of it. I think it's really important, especially for those tweens. If your tweens are on platforms and on social media, whether it's through their iPad or their phone or things like that, that way it gives you a periscope view of what's going on in their life, and knowing the communities that they're in and who the positive influences are, so you can encourage that, and who the negative influences are, so you can discourage that. So just bear that in mind. Everyone, take care of each other. Be patient with one another. Be willing to hear the other side and make mistakes and acknowledge if you made a mistake. Right now, be a great role model for your family and for your kids, and for each other. As always, we appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week, every Thursday at 11 here going forward. Thanks. Have a great day.